morning, everyone. Please feel free to continue to get your lunch and make yourselves at home. Welcome to the Wolverine Caucus Forum. And as we always say, we like to think that we're changing the world one forum at a time. And so today we have not this forum. So these forums are brought to you by the Office of the Vice President for Government Relations and the Alumni Association. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you our Vice President for Government Relations, Cynthia Wilbanks, who will introduce our esteemed speaker. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Veronica. It's great to be here. It's nice to see everybody out on yet another polar vortex day. But we're persisting through all of this. In fact, I was talking to someone just the other day who said, "Don't you remember when you were a kid, we always had days like this?" And I had to stretch back my memory, and I thought, well, I think we probably did, but it's been so long that we forgot how to negotiate all of it. But thank you, Veronica. Thanks to all of you for being here. We're thrilled to have this kind of an audience for today's presentation, which I am certain all of you are going to enjoy. So it's my privilege to introduce Mark Bernstein, a member of the University of Michigan Board of Regents, elected in the fall of 2012, and now in his 14th month as a member of the board. I can say without hesitation that Mark has embraced every aspect of his service to the Board of Regents, to the University of Michigan, with great gusto and with great humility about the tasks associated with the governance of the University of Michigan. So we want to say thank you to Mark for his public service. Mark is a Democrat from Ann Arbor. He holds 3 degrees from the University of Michigan. And in each of those degrees, I think you find that he has refined his thinking and his approach to life and work, and it shows in the way he approaches many, many issues. He's the president and managing partner of the Sam Bernstein law firm, and previously he had stints in the investment banking division of the Citigroup, Salomon Smith Barney, and also worked for a time in the Clinton administration as part of the press pool operations. I'm sure that would have been an interesting opportunity for him as well. But significantly, I'd like to mention that Mark was appointed to the Michigan Civil Rights Commission in 2004. And he served with distinction on that commission, and during that tenure, he established and helped to establish the Michigan Civil Rights Academy, convened the Michigan Civil Rights Summit. And I think you can see from that type of service a deep commitment to the issues that the Civil Rights Commission confronts every single day on behalf of the citizens of the state of Michigan. I can mention many other characteristics of Mark's background, but he has a wonderful family in Ann Arbor. You'll frequently see them attending events with Mark. Delightful. They're giving it their all. And it is a real pleasure to have him willing to address all of you today on a topic that's very important to all of us. And I think you'll find his presentation quite stimulating, and we'll encourage questions after he's finished, and I think Mark would be certainly willing to do so. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Mark Bernstein.
Thank you very much. I appreciate, when I was on there's some old colleagues of mine from the Civil Rights Commission here in the department, and we never saw this building. We were at the commission. This is like the high rent district in Lansing. But I really appreciate that introduction. I want this to be as informal as possible, so do not hesitate to ask a question, raise your hand. It was funny, there's a faculty member in the law school named Richard Primus, who's a brilliant, truly leading, be a great speaker for this group, leading constitutional scholar in the country. And he came to a meeting at my firm, and he, to observe it, he just was interested in kind of the work that we were doing. And then after the meeting, he said, in your law firm, on the faculty at University of Michigan, when we have a faculty meeting, when we raise our hand, it indicates that we are interested in speaking. And then he said, in your family, when you raise your hand, it indicates that you are speaking. and so So what I want to encourage you to do is if anything that we're talking about here raises a question, just shout it out, please. It will make this far more interesting and a lot more engaging. And also, if I can't get the information, if I don't know the answer, I'm not going to try to fake it. I'll just say I'll get you the information. Because the university, one thing that I have learned is just how immensely complex this institution is. And we just finished before I dive into this, we just finished a presidential search, and we introduced Mark Schlissel, who's the current provost at Brown, to be our next president, who I'm sure will come and speak to this group and who is extraordinary. But the search process, without revealing a lot about it, which I can't, was fascinating in the sense that it really allowed the regents and the faculty who were a part of the process to really examine the institution and appreciate the complexity of the institution as it relates to the moving pieces of it. And so, the university in many respects it's many things, but at U of M, it's really three big pieces. It's a huge public research enterprise, the largest of its kind in many respects in the world. It's a huge academic enterprise, the best large and elite institution of its kind, frankly, in the world. And it's also a massive health system, the largest university-affiliated health system in the world. And so if you were going out and searching for the next president of the health system, or you're going out and searching for the next director of research, it's not easy, but there's a farm system for that. There are people who have been doing that kind of work for their whole career. And when you're doing work, when you're searching for the president of the University of Michigan, there is no institution like it that smashes together essentially these three huge enterprises. And it was an interesting moment to really think about how truly complex the institution is and how far it reaches, both vertically and horizontally, across literally every piece of every element of the human condition. So what I want to do is jump into the presentation. There are really three pieces. Let's see. There we go. Three parts of this, right? What's at stake? Then we'll talk about affordability and accessibility, and then we'll talk about some priorities. And when you talk about what's at stake, there are really two things. One is we're going to discuss briefly just what is the university, assets, like what does it look like? What is this current structure and size and impact of the university? But frankly, far more importantly, and this applies to all of higher education, I know that there are leaders in higher education in the room today, and people who think about higher education, I think, from a policy perspective every day. One of the people that we met with during our retreat, the board had a retreat to New York in January, was the current president of Yale, and who is a distinguished scholar, Pete Salovey, and he essentially is the leader in kind of the emotional intelligence arena. And he shared some statistics about the power and importance of higher education that I think does frame the what's at stake question. He shared some statistics that he had just gotten the day before during President Obama's conference on higher ed that was held at the White House early in January. And what he said was that if you are from a household income in the bottom quartile, the likelihood of getting out of that quartile without higher education is 5%. With higher education, the likelihood of getting out of that quartile is 84%. There is no more striking statistic, in my opinion, that exemplifies the important transformative ladders of opportunity that higher education at the University of Michigan, at Lansing, at Texas Arlington, at the 14 other campuses around our state, what they represent to the families of this state, then a new beginning, a new opportunity for students and their families. Let me get into what's at stake. Well, I'm going backwards. Okay, so everybody in this room loves and has a great affinity for the University of Michigan, but what is really striking, actually, is the University of Michigan is an old place. It's older than UVA. It's older than the state of Michigan. And it was a model for public research universities. It's been a leader in virtually every part of higher education and discovery. We've had alumni, I think Cynthia's been very careful to not make this apparently a political list. So maybe Gerald Ford should be on it. I'm a Democrat, but he's a great man. But Larry Page at Google, William Mayo from the Mayo Clinic, for example, went to the medical school. Arthur Miller, the great playwright. It is a really unique public mission that the university represents. James B. Angel, the longest-serving president of the university, the last president before Mark Schlissel to have a beard, which is a piece of trivia that someone shared with me. I think that's true, right? Yeah. But he coined the phrase "an uncommon education for the common man." I think every single Michigan presentation has this in it, and probably should have it in it. It's not necessarily accurate anymore because it's not all men now, obviously, and our students are not very common in terms of their talents and their aspirations and their accomplishments before coming to school. But what's very important, I think, to appreciate is just how unique this state was, and especially the University of Michigan, but all of our public universities, in making public universities that are exceptional, accessible, and available to the public. When the University of Michigan was founded in 1817, not many years after the War of Independence, the Revolutionary War, there were really two forms of higher education in this country. There was maybe three kind of military-type academies, which kind of were starting to exist. Religious-based universities or colleges, really, that had like a theological orientation to them. And then thirdly, very elite, essentially closed, only available to the most affluent and privileged kind of colleges. Think Harvard, think William and Mary type models. There was no university structure that, at the time, that was intended to be public in the real sense of the word public, that really embraced a public mission for the university, university with a lowercase u. And so we have to really appreciate that legacy that the University of Michigan represents, and the foresight that the state had in essentially establishing it and supporting it and continuing it on its way over 2 centuries ago. We're entering our 3rd century. But we do represent also a relatively unique combination of themes, really. This academic prestige, which is unmistakable, a public ethos, a commitment to our mission as a public university, and then this remarkable history, tradition, and culture that make people feel passionate about the University of Michigan, the way everybody here is. Those are unique and important. I'll move quickly through this, but this is U of M is we have 3 campuses. 3 of the 15 public university campuses in our state are part of the U of M system, for lack of a better word. U of M Flint and U of M Dearborn came to the University of Michigan about the same time in the mid to late 50s. The Ann Arbor campus was founded, as we were discussing, in 1817. It is an immensely large place, the U of M campus. Just to put things in perspective, we spend $100 million a year in Ann Arbor on utilities alone. We're doing better at that every day, but that puts it into perspective, I think. This is an important, I think, a critically important slide, because what it does, what here is we capture, I think, one of the critically important themes of the university, which is that we have 99 top 10 graduate programs on our campus. Okay, we're number 18 in the world reputation rankings, and we have the number 1 research portfolio. Why is this important? And let me put it into context. If you're a university and you have 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 programs in the top 10, you are in pretty good shape. You're pleased with that portfolio. If you have 20 or 30 or 40, you're now into a range where you have maybe 20 or 30 or 40 universities in that category. You get to the 90 plus, 95 plus, and there's 4 universities in the world that have that type of portfolio: Michigan, Stanford, Harvard, and Texas, I believe. And so that is an incredible display of excellence across the university's platform. So why is that important, other than bragging rights and ego? It's important because if you look back, and there's some folks here, Jim and other folks can talk about maybe the history of kind of higher education, or the history of really education, thinking about complex issues, is that 50, 60 years ago, the general approach to solving problems, and it's probably applies to in the public policy arena also, is to really look at things in a very granular way, to look at to deep dive very deeply into that particular problem, to look at it in a granular way, to look at it in almost an isolated, siloed way. And over time, over the last 50, 40, 30 years, there has been a recognition that problems are complex, that they are interrelated, that you cannot study a problem in its own isolated, siloed way, that you have to look at, and if folks here who are engaged in public policy know this from the work that you do every day, you have to solve the problem in an interrelated fashion. And so students know this, scholars know this, researchers know this, the folks who write research grants know this, and so therefore if you want to solve the world's problems, which are complex, interrelated, you can't be good at 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 things. You have to be good at 99 things, right? And so this is, in my opinion, that 99 number is the most important number when you think about the impact, that the ability of any institution in higher ed to make an impact. People used to think about engineering and medicine as two completely different things. If you were great at medicine, you're Johns Hopkins, you're medicine, you got it made. Well, now you have to think about medicine with engineering, and biomedical engineering in particular. So if you're not good at engineering, if you're not elite at engineering, and you're not elite at medicine, you're not going to get the research money, you're not going to attract the faculty and scholars, you're not going to attract the students, you're not going to be able to make the discoveries that we need to make to really solve the world's problems. The University of Michigan got a $150 million grant to build satellites, right? There's no Department of Satellite Manufacturing at the University of Michigan. I think there's 19 units that are involved in that grant. I don't think there's another university in the world that can compete with us and deliver that kind of comprehensive, horizontal excellence that we have at the University of Michigan. And so it's something that we should appreciate and be very, very proud of. And it's very difficult, by the way, to stay a leader in this way, in this regard. We are also obviously a key driver for our state's economic recovery. A huge alumni base. We have 38,000 students from Michigan enrolled at the University of Michigan. Our health system is one of the great jewels of the state, and we purchase about $1.5 billion from over 42,000 Michigan companies. That $1.3 billion of research that was referenced in the previous slide is a huge number. And it has a spin-off. In fact, there was an announcement today, it's kind of come out in over the last day or two about an initiative that we're working on in Western Wayne County, or Eastern Wayne County rather, Western. It's Western Wayne County in Canton, or Plymouth, that's going to be a really, truly elite, groundbreaking place for discovery of lightweight materials that could spin off as many as 10,000 jobs. It's already got almost $150 million of funding that's allocated to it. It's a consortium, not just with us, but also with the Ohio State University. So we do cooperate with them from time to time. Now, so I guess it's appropriate actually to go unintended, nice segue into athletics. We happen to have an athletics program. Some people have described the University of Michigan to me as a hospital with a football team, or a football team with a parking problem. But our athletic program is an important part of our university. It's been described as the front porch of the university. I would describe it more accurately, I think, or more aspirationally, as a front porch of the university. We have so many extraordinary things happening on our campus. It's a high risk, high reward piece of the institution, and it requires, candidly, a significant and sometimes frustrating amount of time in my 14 months as Regent, I think I spent more time than I wish involving athletics or athletic-related issues. But it's important, and we have to be important stewards of the the work that we do on the field. One of the things that is unique about our athletics program is that it generates a surplus, which is unique. There are not many Division I programs that do that. And number two, and many people don't realize this, maybe you do, but the athletic department at Michigan actually writes checks to the University of Michigan in addition to sharing some of the surplus. They also write, if you were all scholarship athletes on the football team, the University of Michigan writes a check to the University of Michigan for your tuition. There are very few universities that do that. Most schools just waive the tuition. They're flying on frequent flyer points, essentially. In Michigan, they actually, if you're an in-state student, they write a check for $13,000. If you're not a state student, they write a check for much more than that. And many of our student athletes, by the way, are out-of-state students. But we can talk more about that if you wish down the road. A trivia question for you: who is Michigan's winningest coach in the history of Michigan athletics? Any guesses? It is. It's not Fielding Yost and it's not Bo Schembecker. It's our women's softball coach, Coach Hutchinson. A legend in, maybe only in this group would you get that question right. So usually that's gives me a chance to breathe a little bit when we do that. So now let's go to I'm going backwards. The affordability issue. The affordability challenge, I guess, is the way to think about it. We have divested in this state from our support of higher education. There are some statistics. Bridge came out with a statistic, a research about a year ago that said that if we just wanted to bring our state into the median of state spending per pupil on higher ed, we'd have to invest another $1 billion in higher education just to get us into the middle. We went from one of the best funded higher ed systems in the United States to one of the worst. This graph, and by the way, I'll make this available to folks. You can pick up I don't know, Cynthia, we talked about how we're going to do that, but if you want the slides, I don't know if you have. Okay, great, they're in the back. So you can see that, state support per student for higher ed went from about $11,000 down to $6,385 per pupil. This statement, I think, normally I'm not a big fan of putting statements up in a slide, but it's powerful. Our 2014 state appropriation is comparable to the amount received in 1995 in nominal dollars, and the same as 1964 in real dollars. That is remarkable. And these are institutions that the whole world is trying to build. You go to China, you go to India, they are rushing to build campuses that look like the University of Michigan. They're pouring billions and billions and billions of dollars into these schools, and we already have that here. And these are immensely fragile institutions. A few bad decisions, a few wrong turns, and we can drop in our prestige, in the research dollars that we're able to attract, and the students that we're able to attract and retain. You look at some universities, and that's happened. University of Wisconsin made bad decisions. Their funding dropped, and they are not discussed in the same breath as the University of Michigan anymore. And there are other examples that I can go into where bad decisions have been made, and they are, in some respects, irreparable. There's a roughly 6% budget increase that's been proposed for higher ed, almost 6% in Ann Arbor, 5.4% in Dearborn, and 7.2% in Flint. It's important. We appreciate this. We are, the university endowment. And two things that I brought with me, if you want to look at these afterwards. I'm on the finance committee on the board, and these are the ratings from Standard & Poor's and Moody's reports about the University of Michigan's debt. And they're written by completely, quote unquote, completely objective bond rating agencies. And so I think I have about 40 copies of them. I can hand out more if they're interested, but afterward you can get them. In these reports, they give tremendous credit to the University of Michigan in particular for being able to manage through an environment of divestment. Some small increases that have occurred, which are important and appreciated, but in an environment where there is this shift happening. And the next slide, I had a economics professor who said that whenever you see a line graph and you see two lines cross on a line graph, that's when you should start paying attention, because that's when something important is happening. And this is a great graph in that regard. The blue line this is a percentage, essentially the mix of our general fund. The blue line is state appropriation, and this green line, well, this is complicated. How do I go backward? Just getting to my punchline. That's like my favorite, my momentum. Oh, here we go. So the green line, I'm not going to touch this.